So the particular batch I'm making today is about 3 gallons of milk. You don't necessarily have to use 3 gallons. That's just what I have on hand, so it works out great. But the recipe that I'll include in the description below has 1 gallon, 2 gallon, 3 gallons, and I've even done up to 4 gallons as well, and it worked just fine, as long as you keep multiplying the denomination for what you need. As far as ingredients go, obviously you need the raw milk, you need citric acid, and then you need some rennet. I always use animal rennet. I never use vegetable rennet or any of the modified rennets at all. As far as supplies, I'm going to go ahead and show you how to skim the milk. So you'll need a little scooper and then a cream jar. You'll need a thermometer, a couple spoons, and then obviously a large pot. I've got the 5 gallon out today because I'm making such a large batch. So to begin with, the recipe calls for skim milk. So I've started skimming some of the milk already, but I still have a half gallon to go. So this is not homogenized milk, so that means I have the cream line. So I'm going to go ahead and just scoop out the cream. This cream is great for many things, from coffee to butter to all sorts of different recipes. Super great stuff. So you want to make sure you set that aside and use it for other things. Let me scoop this out. And you can always just use a scoop, and you can tell when you get the cream because it's a little more creamier in color. Get it? And then also when you start getting towards the bottom, you'll see the separation between just the regular milk and the cream. And it does by no means has to be perfect. A little bit of cream is actually called for in several cheese recipes, and so it's not a problem at all if you have some extra cream that actually goes in the pot that you use. All right, so that's looking good and separated for me. So I'm gonna go ahead and set this off to the side, and I'll use that later. So now I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna take this, I'm gonna dump it into the pot. All right, so that's looking good. So now what you wanna do is you wanna stir occasionally. So I stir every 5-10 minutes. You can go 15 minutes if you want, but the most important thing is that you're not cooking the milk. So you're going to go ahead and you're going to stir every 10-15 minutes, and I've got it on simmer, so I'm just going to turn it just on simmer. Obviously the stove that you've got is going to vary, so that's why it's really important to keep the thermometer on hand, and you want to heat it up until it's 55 degrees. So after it hits 55 degrees, we're gonna go ahead and add the citric acid. So just keep stirring until you hit that 55 degree mark, and then we'll come back to it and we'll show you what to do next. So the milk has gone ahead and heated up to the necessary 55 degrees, been stirring it throughout, and so now we're ready to add in our citric acid. So for this particular batch, I need 4.5 teaspoons of citric acid. Again, that's going to vary based upon how much milk you're using. We're doing 3 gallons. So I also need 3/4 cup of cool water, and I'm just going to add that into the citric acid, and I'm just going to stir. And the idea here is to dissolve as much of the citric acid as you can. I find myself stirring for quite a bit of time. Seemingly longer than what I think I will have to get the citric acid to dissolve. But you want to, be patient with it, give it a few minutes, and just make sure you get as much dissolved as you can. All right, so after a couple minutes of stirring, there's hardly any crystals left in it, which is great. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add it directly to the milk. And when you're adding it to the milk, you want to go in an up and down motion, stirring in the milk. And the reason you're doing that is you're just making sure that the citric acid gets all throughout the milk. So you just keep stirring in that motion for about a minute, 30 seconds to a minute. And you're just going up and down, stirring around the pot. So that way everything gets mixed in. You're not leaving the top or the bottom without the citric acid in it. So we'll go ahead and keep going. And then after this, you're going to go ahead and you're going to heat it up again. And you're going to heat it up to around 88-90 degrees. So you're going to be right around in that mark. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to add in our rennet. We've gone ahead and let the milk heat up to 88 degrees. So I've been stirring throughout, just occasionally every 15-20 minutes. Got the stove still on simmer. Again, you're not looking to cook the milk in any way. You're just looking to heat it up slowly, making sure the stuff at the bottom, which is nice and warm, gets up to the top. So that way you've got a nice even temperature throughout. Obviously make sure that your thermometer is about midway in the pot. That's a good judge as to where your temperature is actually at. So I'm gonna go ahead and turn it off, and I've gone ahead and added the rennet to cool water, so that because I'm doing 3 gallons, it's about 0.75 teaspoons of rennet. You do not need a lot of rennet in any recipe really for milk, or yeah, for cheese making. And then the 3/4 cup of cool water. I've been letting it sit for a few minutes because that's what the instructions on my rennet says. Make sure you're following the instructions for the particular rennet that you're using. So now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add it in, and I'm going to use the same stirring method that I used for the citric acid. Again, what we're doing is just making sure that everything gets spread out nice and evenly from the top to the bottom of the milk. And so just what happened with the citric acid is the milk was starting to sour. That's what it was doing to it. That's why you'll see even before you add the rennet, there are little chunks in here. And that's okay. That's totally normal. That's actually a souring of the milk, which I know sounds weird, but that's what you want to do. Now the rennet needs to be added around the 90-degree mark, and that is because that's the temperature of a young calf. So rennet actually comes from the 4th stomach of a young calf, and that's what helps to set the curds. And the curds is what actually makes the cheese. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to keep stirring for just a second longer. I've got the rennet nice and mixed in there. And now what I'm going to do, so I'm on an electric stove, I'm just going to turn it off, and I'm going to leave the pot on, and I'm going to cover it. In the recipe, if you do have a gas stove, there's a couple extra steps for you to do. I think leave it on just a little bit after 88 just to make sure the pot stays nice and warm. So I'm going to go ahead and cover it. You can wait as short as 15 minutes. I'm probably going to wait closer to an hour for this. And the way that you're going to know that it's ready is when you cut it. You'll notice that there's a nice, easy, clean divide in the curds. And I'll show you that when we get there. So it's been an hour, and I've gone ahead and let the rennet sit in the milk. I can see that the curd is forming, so it's a big solid mass right now. I'll have a picture for you right here. And now what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to take my knife. Now you don't have to use a knife, you can use something else, but the idea is something that's long and thin. And I'm just going to start separating the giant curd up, is essentially all it is, into tiny cubes, so about an inch thick. And so what the mozzarella is it's these cubes melted together. And it stretches and all the rest of it, and that's where you get your curds from, which ultimately make all varieties of cheese. In this case, we're just making mozzarella today. So I'm going to go ahead and cut them up into about an inch long ways, and then I'll cut it perpendicular another inch, so you've got about 1-inch cubes in there. It does not need to be exact by any stretch of the imagination, just something that breaks it up so that way you can stir it. And then also, after I'm done cutting it, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the heat on. And you can actually turn it up a good bit now. I'll probably turn mine on about medium. Again, you don't want to scorch anything, so be careful. But you want to start heating it up. And the ideal temperature is going to end up being around 120 to 140 in that range. So as you're stirring it, you're going to notice that the curds are going to break down. They're almost even going to start looking stringy or clumpy. That's all okay. You want to start just stirring them, turning on the heat, which I'm going to do now. And then after about, once it gets to 120 or so, you're going to take your second spoon and you're going to start combining it, kind of bringing it towards the center. And the reason is again, you want the curds to be melted, but you want to bring them together in a mass. So for the next probably 20 minutes at least or so, I'm going to start heating this up again, and I'm going to stir every few minutes. So you just want to keep stirring every few minutes so nothing burns, and then I'll bring you back in when we start bringing the curds together to form that stringy mass that we ultimately are looking for in mozzarella. So I've gone ahead and let the whey heat up, and you'll notice that the difference between the whey and the curds is that the curds are these white globules coming out of the milk, and then the whey is the byproduct. So you'll see that there's a temperature difference between the whey and the curds. The whey is going to be hotter because it's just liquid, as obviously the curds are actually a solid mass, so those will be a little colder. But this is a good sign. So I've started to bring them closer to one side, so I'm always kind of scooping towards this one side. And as you can see, they're starting to form together. And ultimately what you're doing here is you're heating up the curds so they form together and they start stretching. So they need to be pretty hot. And ours are not quite there yet, so we're going to keep it on medium heat, stirring consistently, bringing them to the side to form that solid mass. So I've gone ahead and continued to let this heat up, and as you can tell, when I bring it up, it's starting to stick together really well. It's starting to be a bit stretchy. At about this point, I will add my salt. I added a little bit earlier before I turn the recording back on. I'm gonna go ahead and add the rest of it now. I've tried different times of adding the salt. I find that it doesn't matter a ton if you add it right at the moment the curds start forming, or if you wait a little bit like I just did. The most important thing obviously is so the salt gets in there, so it gets on the curd, so it flavors it well. So I'm going to keep combining it and keep trying to stretch it. So what you're going to see is I'm just continuing to bring it to the side, and then I'll actually start pulling it up now to start trying to see when it's ready to stretch. So as you can see, it's really starting to get pretty stretchy here, which is great. So I'll start trying to pull it. It's okay, it fell back in, but the idea here is to start heating, keep it heating up, keep pulling it. The mozzarella, a nice mozzarella has a nice separation to it, and this is how you get that. Eventually it's just going to get stuck on the spoons, which is totally okay. It's still a little too stringy for me, so I don't quite want that yet. So I'm trying to just stretch it, and then I'm trying to put the end that's not up in the air back down into whey, and the reason for that is just to keep heating it, keep flavoring it with that salt. I'm actually going to try to put it back in just one more time so I just want to heat it up just a little bit more. It just doesn't seem quite ready to me yet. You're not at a huge risk of overheating this, unless of course the pot is boiling or something like that. You never want it to get that hot. We're just looking for that nice mass that stretches real well, and we're very close. I just want to give it a little bit more heat on the curds, just to mold them and form them together just a little bit more. It's starting to look real good here. A little bit came off, that's okay. This is looking real good. It's holding together nice and firm. All right, so now what I've gone ahead and done is I've added a glass bowl. It's just on the other side of the pot here. I'm just gonna dip it in one more time. Make sure that we get some good salty whey on it. And then I'm gonna go ahead and stick it in the pan. So this is looking real good here. Set these off to the side. And now you've got yourself some nice fresh mozzarella. You see it's got a nice good pull to it. Very good. It's always the best right when it comes out. So if you have guests or something like that coming over, try to get as close as you can to being as fresh as possible. Even when it's not right out of the pot like it is here. We've had guests come over and try this. It's some of the best cheese they've had. It's just really that natural. You can't replace the natural cheese. You can't replace the homemade nature of cheese. Thanks for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe, and hopefully I'll bring you more cheese making videos soon.